Ryan thought he had it all: a rewarding job, a devoted wife, and a bright future. Life appeared to be full of promise, and he frequently admired how smoothly everything had fallen into place. Melissa, his 3-year wife, was his rock. She was the ideal balance of everything. Together, their compassion and tenacity allowed them to pursue their common goals of starting a family. As a software programmer, Ryan had the opportunity to travel the world and age alongside his career, rising through the ranks at his company, gaining the respect of his coworkers, and earning a consistent salary that gave them a luxurious lifestyle. But Melissa flourished in the business sector as an executive assistant to the strong and mysterious CEO of Hale Enterprises, Victor Hale. Despite the demanding nature of her profession, Melissa found it fulfilling to share stories about her everyday struggles and victories. Their love filled the walls, which were decorated with pictures of their fun trips. These moments reflected their home at the dinner table, with laughter ringing in the cozy living room, and the quiet moments they spent discussing endlessly while preparing for the future, establishing a family, and already discussing names and nursery design. It felt as though all the pieces of a puzzle had fit together perfectly. But Ryan began noticing Melissa's late evenings at work. It started gradually, but soon he realized it was becoming a frequent occurrence. Ryan recognized Melissa's occasional evenings spent on reports or organizing Victor's trip. She was committed to her work and proud of her capacity to manage high-pressure circumstances. But as the weeks went by, the late nights increased. "I'll come home late once more," Melissa texted one Thursday night, her comments hurried and short. Victor needed her to do a last-minute job by the next morning. Despite scowling at the message, Ryan offered his customary assistance, saying, "No problem. Let me know if you need anything." Melissa's texts were getting shorter and shorter, with her previously detailed accounts of her day now being reduced to hazy updates. When she got home, she seemed to be constantly distracted. In other places, the energy in their discussions waned, replaced with quiet or preoccupied nods. Ryan gently questioned Melissa about her long hours and Victor's demanding nature. She responded that things had been stressful lately. "But hey," Ryan said, "don't let it take over your life, all right? We still need time together." Melissa grinned, although it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Things will settle down soon," she said. But it didn't feel convincing. Melissa's once bubbly personality began to feel more reserved, and Ryan noticed other changes. She started focusing more on how she looked, choosing more professional outfits, even on casual business days. Ryan couldn't shake his suspicions that something was changing between them. But Melissa had never offered him a reason to doubt her fidelity. Despite his implicit faith in her, he still felt uneasy. One night, Melissa entered the dinner table, her face tense. "I apologize," she said. Ryan hurriedly checked, neglecting to mention that she had to go out with Victor for a customer meeting next week. "You just returned from another trip last month," he said, forehead furrowing. "I know," Melissa sighed, "but he's depending on me, Ryan. This is crucial." Ryan nodded slowly, concealing his displeasure. "All right, don't overdo it." Melissa gave him a quick smile and a cheek kiss, saying, "Thank you for your understanding." Ryan sat at the table, looking at the unfinished dinner he had made, as she vanished into the bedroom to pack. He believed this was just a short-term situation, but as Melissa slept next to him that night, he couldn't help but sense that their idyllic life was beginning to fall apart. The next morning, Ryan woke up and stared at the ceiling, reliving the small events, the rushed texts, the late nights, the subtle changes in her behavior. He wanted to think it was just work-related stress, but he felt uneasy. His suspicions refused to wane. Ryan had always taken great satisfaction in being a helpful husband, someone who had complete faith in Melissa. But as the weeks went by, their distance grew. He couldn't shake the impression that someone or something was separating them. Ryan wasn't aware yet, But his once ideal life was going to be put to the test in ways he could never have predicted. Neither of them publicly acknowledged it, but their marriage began to grow more distant, and Ryan tried to convince himself that the changes were just temporary and that Melissa's tension would go away once work calmed down. However, Melissa's optimism was gradually giving way to a persistent feeling of worry. She became more reclusive and frequently dismissed Ryan's attempts to engage in talks that used to flow naturally. Conversations were now stilted, full of evasive answers and hasty justifications. One evening, as they sat across from one another at the dinner table, Ryan asked, "How was your day?" Melissa answered with a sigh. "Victor has been on my case regarding deadlines, which is exhausting." Sensing that there was more to the story, Ryan scowled. "What about after work?" Melissa hesitated for a moment before shrugging. "Not really. I stayed late." Her phone chimed on the counter as she finished some reports. Melissa swiftly reached for it and turned the device away, and Ryan watched her. Do it with a sinking feeling. Trying to keep his tone light, he asked again, "Yeah?" She quickly set the phone face down. "Victor's just being challenging," she said. This wasn't the first time his name had come up. Despite never having seen Victor in person, Ryan had heard stories from Melissa about him, stories that depicted a demanding, conceited boss who enjoyed dominating others. Melissa had frequently made jokes about his arrogance, but recently her tone had changed from lighthearted to wary. The tension came to a peak one evening when Melissa insisted they go to a business gathering. It was meant to be a networking opportunity and a chance for Ryan to meet her co-workers. Although he wasn't excited about it, Ryan wanted to support her. The event was extravagant, held in a large ballroom with a live jazz band and crystal chandeliers. Melissa looked gorgeous in a sleek navy dress, her hair styled in a sophisticated bun. As the evening went on, Ryan felt proud as they walked into the room hand in hand. He spoke with Melissa's co-workers, listening courteously as they talked about business plans and future endeavors, but he couldn't shake the sensation that he was once again an outsider in a world where Melissa seemed to fit in perfectly. When Victor eventually came over, Ryan disliked him immediately. He was a big, strong man with a confident, even smug expression. His gaze lingered on Melissa for a little too long, and his handshake with Ryan was firm, yet contemptuous. "Melis told me everything about you, Ryan," Victor remarked in a somewhat patronizing tone. "I hope you don't mind." He laughed and tried to smile, but his eyes darted to Melissa. "Of course, Melissa is one of the finest. Without her, I couldn't accomplish half of what I do." Despite Melissa's polite smile, Ryan could see her cheeks were slightly flushed. Victor's attention remained on her as the conversation continued, and his praises became more intimate. "You've been amazing lately, Melissa," he said in a smooth tone. "You manage everything with such ease, and you're always so good at multitasking." Ryan interrupted, his voice tight. "Victor, I'm sure you're aware of how lucky you are," he said, giving him a pointed look. The tension in Ryan's stomach grew uneasy. Later that night, as they drove home, Ryan couldn't stay silent any longer. "What's going on? It's not professional the way Victor looks at you." His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Is that how it felt to you too, Melissa?" Melissa, resting her head against the window, sighed. "It's just his personality." "You're overreacting, Ryan." Her defensiveness only heightened his suspicions, but he didn't want to provoke her further. The conversation ended, but the unease lingered. Weeks passed, and as Melissa continued arriving late, her justifications became less convincing. Ryan observed her hesitancy when he asked about her day. Her phone was always buzzing, and she seemed to guard her eyes whenever Victor's name came up. One evening, Ryan decided to take action. Melissa had texted him earlier about a last-minute meeting with Victor. The tone of the message felt cold. At 9:30 p.m., Ryan couldn't ignore the feeling in his chest anymore. He grabbed his keys and headed to Melissa's office. The building, where Hale Enterprises was located, was a massive glass skyscraper, and the city lights gave downtown a menacing glow. Ryan hesitated as he parked across the street, feeling absurd for a brief moment, but he quickly pushed the thought aside. As he entered the building, the security guard gave him an inquisitive look. "I'm here to visit my wife, Melissa, who works with Victor," Ryan said, attempting to sound casual. The guard indicated the elevator. Most top-floor offices are deserted by now. When Ryan arrived at Melissa's office, what he saw made his blood run cold. There she was, sitting at her desk, with Victor leaning casually over her shoulder. His hand rested on her shoulder, fingertips grazing her skin as he spoke. Despite her rigid posture, she didn't pull away. Ryan's heart raced as he pushed, the door wide open. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded. Melissa jumped, her eyes wide with shock. Victor straightened, slipping his hands into his pockets, and gave Ryan a smug smile. "What are you doing here?" he asked. Ryan's fists clenched. "Don't touch my wife," he said, "and don't speak to me like that."